This show is sponsored in part by Jackie Mahali Photography, where personal branding, photography, and video help women entrepreneurs over 40 feel confident, beautiful, and seen. Start getting paid what you're worth. JackieMahaliPhotography.com when it's time to elevate your brand and your image. Hey everybody, I'm Jill Conway, and this is Secrets of Powerful Women, a show dedicated to celebrating and supporting strong and successful women and sharing their stories. I'm hoping you will be inspired to pursue your own dreams, reclaim your voice, and discover your strengths. So my guest today is Jane Hansen. Jane is a legend in the New York TV news industry, a top news anchor for 30 years at the NBC flagship station in the #1 market in the country. She is now the founder of and CEO of a media training company. So Jane, welcome to the show and thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Long Island, one of my very favorite places on earth, where I've had a home for about 30 years.
Wow. So you did the whole summer thing or the weekend thing from the city?
Yes, I did.
Did you ever take the Hampton Jitney, Jane? Are you
all the time? I was a regular on the Jitney. I could tell you the schedules.
Oh, I heard what went on that Jitney. So I don't know if it's true, but I heard stories. I heard stories.
That's for offline, Jill.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right. That's in the break. So Jane, I really want to thank you for coming on. And like I mentioned, you are a powerhouse and let's talk about your TV news career first, and then we'll talk about what you're doing now and stuff. But talk about how you got your start in news, and is that something you always wanted to do? I mean, how did it all come about?
Well, I grew up in a little tiny town in rural Minnesota. Think Little House on the Prairie. And my hometown is very close to Walnut Grove, which is where that allegedly took place. Yeah. So in the middle of the prairie, miles to go anywhere. So that's where I grew up, about as far from New York City in culture, concept, geography, everything. And yes, I wanted to see the world is what I wanted. When you grow up in that kind of a rural place, you want to be out there. And my dad, who was quite the news hound himself, he even had a little radio show for a while. Oh, wow. Even though by trade he was a chef. But anyway, my father would read me stories from the newspaper when I was a little girl, and then we'd talk about those places. And so I said, probably with a childlike voice, I'm going to live in New York someday.
Right.
And I did. So I have a degree in broadcast journalism, and I got really, really, really lucky in that I moved to New York to work for WNBC TV when I was in my early 20s. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure when I walked in the door, those wonderful veteran newscasters and reporters that I worked with went, "What the heck is this? What is she doing here?" But to this day, I'm convinced I got this job because the news director, long story short, I'd actually had a talent scout. They used to have them then in the TV news business. Sure. Had seen my tape and had sent it around, and I was brought in by WCBS to possibly audition for the top anchor spot at the 11 o'clock news. Well, it became evident very quickly that this little girl was way too green for that job. But I went home, told everybody that I was about to move to New York because I was getting a job there by hook or crook. So this news director from WNBC, then a guy named Ron Kershaw, calls me up and he says, "Hey, he identifies himself." I thought it was a joke, so I hung up on him.
Oh my gosh.
I hung up on him. Yeah. He called back. And he said, I think we got disconnected. And I said, "Who is this? I know this is a joke," because I didn't possibly think in the world that was really somebody from 30 Rock calling me.
And there was no caller ID then. So it's not like, right.
No. So I hang up again. He calls back. He says, "Just write my number down before you hang up." So I wrote the number down, hung up. Then I thought, okay, I'm going to call back and see who this is. And of course, I get WNBC TV, Ron Kershaw's office. "How may I help you?" And I just died. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I identify myself, and this woman, his assistant, a lovely, lovely woman named Terry, I identify myself, and she starts to laugh. And she said, "We were wondering and taking bets about what would happen when or if you called back." And so I talked to Ron. He's laughing too. I talked to him. He brings me in for, to meet me and audition and hires me. Wow. And so I think it's me hanging up that got me the job.
Oh my
Don't
goodness.
listen to what I do, women out there. Just think about maybe the persistence or the naivete, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah, but then, I mean, had you had experience before that? You said I mean, you went to school for it, but
Yes, yes,
was
yes.
this like your initial job?
Oh, no, no,
Oh,
no, no. At that moment, I was working in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
okay, okay. Wow. So
So
where did you go from after you got your degree? What was your first stop, and then what stop was NBC?
my very first
That's a
job.
little better because I was like, you got your wow, like you went from home to there is would be mind blowing. So go ahead.
No, I got my very first TV job was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I was the only woman that they had on their staff, and I did everything because I think they thought one was enough. Now, as women, we know that we probably can handle everything, but
Yeah.
it was a lot.
Yeah.
I produced the newscasts. I shot my own video. I went out and did stories. I anchored
Wow.
a new newscast and weekend newscast, or did I produce weekend newscasts? I can't remember. I did everything.
Wow.
And to the point where I would literally have a camera sitting up on a tripod and run around the front of it to do a stand up and hope that I've got the shot right so you can see my face.
Right.
So it was everything, but it was an incredible teaching lesson.
Right.
I learned everything from nuts to bolts in a television newsroom because of that job. And I was only there for a little over a year. And then I went to Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and I wasn't there for very long. And then New
Wow.
York came calling.
Wow, that's magic. That's like beautiful. That
Mhm.
that from one to the other like that. So were you was that must have been a hard transition. I mean, I have to say when you were growing up because I find that incredibly fascinating because I loved Little House on the Prairie. I loved you were half pint then to me, right? So um you were growing up in something that is, as you mentioned, very different than New York, right? I mean,
Yes.
and was there a point in your, did you always want to do it when you were little? Did you say I want to be on TV? And then was there a point where you're like, I don't know, like the doubt set in, or were you always positive that it would happen?
Well, I wasn't so sure about the TV part when I was little. I knew I wanted to be a journalist because I felt like that, because A, I had that incredible curiosity about the world, which probably that is one of the most important characteristics one must have as a journalist. And I knew that that kind of a career would take me and allow me to see things
Mhm.
and be actually the eyes of the audience. The TV part came actually later on. I started to do some acting in high school and in college, and I had an advisor who said to me, "You need to be on TV." And I went, "Really? Do you think so?" And he said, "Yes." And so once I caught that bug, that was it.
Yeah.
And television, obviously I've was in it for a very long time, and I've watched the changes over the years. Uh, I loved my career so much. There wasn't a day that I hated going to work. But it's changed so much now that I'm not so sure I'd be as happy.
Mm,
But back to your point about the cultural differences
yeah.
from, I mean, I was working in, we called them cities, but they're hardly the size of New York. Cedar Rapids, Iowa is not the size of New York City. And I was excited about the opportunity to actually be in New York because it's the number one television market in the country,
Yeah.
probably in the world.
Hmm.
It remains that place today, even though television news is just one of the many places that people get their news today. There's so much diversity in the market. I just felt like I belonged there
Mm,
because everybody crosses through the city at one point or another. That's a newsmaker of some sort, good or bad.
yeah.
And so I felt very comfortable. My dad, on the other hand, was scared to death that I was moving to New York.
Yeah. Wow. Do you have a lot of siblings,
I
Jane?
have two brothers.
So, and what were they thinking of? Like, Jane's going to New York,
Well,
like,
my my middle brother's first thought was, "Oh, she's got to leave her car behind, and it's a hot one. I'm taking it."
oh my God. Oh my goodness.
They were pretty young.
Yeah.
One was, I think, just in college, and the other was still in high school. So they were pretty much like, "Oh yeah, there she goes again. Whatever."
Oh yeah. That's nice. Which, well, I mean, not nice, but you know what I'm saying. Like, that's that you had that way about you where you're like, I'm going, I'm doing it. I don't care
Mhm.
what what other people say. Did you find support with your friends and your family at that point, or they kind of was like Jane's crazy, like like
It was a mix. It was a mix. It was a mix, but I do remember that nobody was surprised. That they all thought, yeah, we knew you would be not staying here in Canby, Minnesota.
yeah.
So,
Did you actually was it an actual farm? Like you had animal farms and you had to grow up. You were growing up tending to animals and stuff, or no?
no, I grew up in town, 1,800 people.
Oh my goodness.
But we had a family farm that my grandparents and great grandparents had settled. And in fact, um, my, I'm Norwegian by background. And so in the late 1800s and early 1900s, when all of those people were leaving, I mean, can you imagine you're going from Norway, where a place where it's really, really cold and lots of fir trees and long, dark winters? Wouldn't you go to Florida if
Yeah,
you're
right. I know.
if you're immigrating? But no, they go to a place that's just like Norway. But they settled a lot of land there, and in fact, my grandparents built a church on their property, and it was very popular. It was a Lutheran church, a very popular church. They brought in the rectors and the pastors. They paid for them, built homes for them, etc., because that's how important that was to them.
Right.
So,
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So, what do you remember what your first story was that you ever like reported?
uh, well, in New York,
Yeah,
I
in the
remember
news.
that I was supposed to be like I was supposed to shadow
Mm, mhm.
for a couple of weeks to kind of get used to things. And so I went out with the camera crew in a live truck up to Harlem because there was a big fire burning.
Mhm.
And it was an apartment fire. And so there were lots of people out on the streets and et cetera, et cetera. So I did what I was used to doing, which was I start looking for people to talk to, and I'm wandering away. And I probably wandered too far. And this is Harlem many years ago when it wasn't as safe as it is today. And so I remember coming back to the live truck, and one of the guys, I can hear one of the crew guys going, "We lost the new girl."
Oh gosh.
So, so I was told, I said, "Look, you can't just go wandering off, okay?" I said, "But I'm looking for people to talk to. We got to tell this story, right?" And they just started rating me back, saying, "You have to be a little more careful, okay?
Mhm.
Conscious of your surroundings." I'm saying, "Okay, okay, I got it." Then the second story I went out on was on Staten Island. It was about horses. Apparently, there'd been a bunch of horse thefts,
Oh,
horse rustling. I'm like, I'm in Staten Island. I'm covering horse rustling. Like, what the heck is this?
right, right. Oh my gosh. That's
Oh,
so it's so interesting, and that's the beauty of news, I think, where every day is different and you never know, right? You never know what you're going to be
mhm.
reporting on. So when did you officially, because you were, I mean, you were on Today in New York, and when did you officially, I know you were reporting, but was it always a reporter anchor, or when were you officially behind the anchor desk and then they were like, this is it. Like, this was,
It's I started weekend anchoring. I would say probably, and I would fill in because I had been an anchor in Iowa before I moved. So I would do fill-in anchoring. And I also started doing the weekend news for a while. And then we began this very, very successful morning show.
Mhm.
And so that was probably 6 years after I arrived,
Hmm. When
something
did
like
you
that.
know? I always ask that, like, when was that pinch me moment, or did you have one when you're like, Jane, I've made it. You know what I mean? Like, you talk to you, like, you're like, you did it. You did it.
I think it was when sometimes the network would ask me to fill in, and this was very early on some of the little evening, they used to have little news capsules in the evenings, like at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock or something like that, minute long. And when they started to fill that, I started to fill in doing that,
Mhm,
um, probably just because I was in the building.
mhm.
But so then all of a sudden, my family, and I have a very large extended family, would start calling me going, "I just saw you." So it was when
Yeah.
you knew that it was broadcast all over the country. That
Yeah.
was probably the moment.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then I mean, you were there for, you settled in, I mean, and you became the face, of NBC in New York.
Uh-huh.
What were some of the, what were some of the most memorable stories that you covered?
It's actually, I find that to be one of the hardest questions to answer because there have been so many.
Yeah.
And being in news, that sometimes when people say, what's your most favorite interview? And you say the last one I ever did.
Right.
But the one story that continues to resonate with me was the day that I went to Lower Manhattan to St. Mark's Park, which is, the East Side, Lower East Side, and I was interviewing Desmond Tutu, was the Archbishop of in South Africa, and had been played a big part in the anti-apartheid movement. And so I'm interviewing him because he was going to speak at the UN later that day. And we're talking away, and as a reporter, you're like, I always got to move, got to get done fast, got something else I got to go do. And I was interrupted in the middle of the interview by his handlers, and they said, we need to talk to him. And I said, I'm almost done. Come on, guys. They're
Five
like,
minutes.
yep. No. You want this. And I said, okay. So they pulled him aside and they told him that he had just won the Nobel Peace Prize.
Wow.
So here's this man that has devoted his life to making his country, his people, help them live in a better way and have freedom, etc. And so he sits back down. I start to choke up when I tell this story because there are tears streaming down his face, which began to happen to me.
Mm.
And as I talk to him, he's saying, this isn't about me. This is about what we had to do, what we had to accomplish. And his words were of such eloquence. And in that moment, I felt like I was truly, truly in the presence of greatness.
Oh, wow.
So that's one thing that has never left my mind, because I've interviewed hundreds of thousands of people,
Mhm.
and I think when you hear somebody speak like he spoke, it was hard not to feel that way. I think the hardest assignment was obviously on the morning of 9/11.
Mhm.
I was the first person on the air at NBC, and I was on the air for a very long time, 8 hours to be exact.
Wow.
And
Wow. Which is very
um,
difficult.
it was, and
Yeah.
first we didn't know what was going on, etc. And about 2 minutes into the broadcast, I was just sitting in the studio waiting to do another update
Mm.
when I hear something's happened at the World Trade Center. Start talking.
Oh,
That was it.
wow.
We have no information.
Wow.
And so they start to find people that could talk with us. So I try to find some eyewitnesses. And we get a guy named Anthony, who was a janitor on West 12th Street. And Anthony says, yeah, I was taking out the garbage and I saw this big plane. Up to this point, we thought maybe it's a little plane that's,
Right.
everything we all went through. And and he says, and it was silver and it was blue and it revved up as it went towards those buildings. And you got to pray because everybody's dead. This
Oh,
is what he says. We're like
oh my.
2 minutes into being on the air, and I have no other information. I have nowhere else to go. And it's one of those moments when you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So, I said, let's just talk very carefully about what you actually witnessed. Turns out Anthony was actually right.
Yeah.
He really was.
Yeah. Wow. It's
So
hard. It's so funny because it's not funny, but it's hard to find sometimes those people, those eyewitnesses, right away. Right, you have to question what you're hearing because you don't know, right? And you're not
and
there.
we didn't for hours and hours. But on a much brighter note, I had a show of my own for a while called Jane's New York,
Mhm.
which was and one of the reasons that we started it was a direct result of 9/11, because we wanted to do something to bring back the wonderful attributes of New York City, to get people to love it again as much as we, as
Yeah.
we, as we do and did. And so I got to go all over the world. As long as I could make a connection to New York, I got to go all over the world.
Mhm.
So I went with paleontologists from the American Museum of Natural History, and we went to Mongolia, to the Gobi Desert,
Oh my gosh.
and we looked for dinosaur bones, and we found plenty of them.
That's amazing.
But what was super fun is they would, there's no roads there. So they brought in these giant trailers, um, just loaded up with generators and freezers and food and great wine. And at night we'd have these feasts, and they brought their guitars, and we just imagine where the stars are brighter than any you've ever seen in your
Wow.
life.
I
And
can't.
you've been trekking old dinosaur bones all day, and at night you're just having great food and glass of wine and singing. It was great.
Wow. Oh my God. Oh, more stories to come. We'll be back with Jane Hansen after the commercial break. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. This show is sponsored by Jackie Mahaly Photography, where personal branding, photography, and video help women entrepreneurs over 40 feel confident, beautiful, and seen. Start getting paid what you're worth. JackieMahalyPhotography.com when it's time to elevate your brand and your image. Well, welcome back, everybody. You're listening to Secrets of Powerful Women. Jane Hansen is with me. She is the CEO and founder of a media training company after a 30-plus year career in TV news here in New York. So, Jane, thanks for coming back.
You're welcome. I love what you just said in that ad about women and about finding their value.
Yeah.
Because that's something I work with a lot in my business with, because sometimes we just can't even figure out our own value.
Mm.
And
True.
you really need to think about that,
Right.
because you are valuable.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's jump in there. So, what do you do? And you're new. I say new, but it's not really. Maybe it's new to some people who are listening, right?
Right.
So you're in news, and now you train people. Talk about it. What do you do?
I work with a lot of executives, and it's really a misnomer to just call it media training, because it's not just helping people get in the media. It's really helping people help bring their executive presence up. It's about, how do I make great presentations? How do I run meetings? How do I get myself out there? How do I create my own brand, etc.? Because I think one of the problems, and this is the problem when you've been in the TV news business and any other business that's very much in the public eye, is that people only see you one way, and they don't think about your capabilities of doing anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of my aha moments when I knew it was time for me to split from TV. I'm sitting in the studio and I'm interviewing a guest, and it was this celebrity-driven show that I was doing towards the end before I left NBC. And we walk out, and the interviewee says, "I didn't get to say what I wanted to say." And I said, "Well, whose fault is that? Because I asked the questions and you merrily followed me along instead of bringing it back to what you wanted to talk about." So for him, it was a complete lost opportunity. I can't remember if he was selling a book or whatever he was doing, but we never talked about it because he never went there.
Right.
And I thought, wow, I can teach people how to actually talk about what they need to talk about to take and move their self forward and their brands forward.
Mm.
And then I realized that so many executive women I work with will say to me, and they're CEOs or they're founders, or maybe they're, very high up in the food chain of whatever company they work for. And they say, I'm great when I'm with my team. I'm great when I'm trying to sell a product, but I walk into the boardroom or the chairman or the CEO's office, and all of a sudden I'm like a 5-year-old in kindergarten, and they freak out because something happens that makes them feel they don't deserve to be there.
Ooh, here we go. Yeah, I love this conversation. Go ahead. It's that mindset. We're not deserving of it for some reason.
Yep. And so and trust me, this has happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's happened to me because I work for a lot of big corporations and a lot of very high level people. And sometimes when I'm sitting in their presence, I suddenly feel they're so much smarter than I am. They're so much more of an expert. Who am I to think that I can be talking to them?
Oh,
The
even you,
strange,
Jane, even you feel that way?
even me. But the strangest thing is, it's because I didn't have a television camera with me, because when I would be interviewing those people, they were like putty in my hands because I had the camera. But it's like the tables were turned a bit, even though I was hired to help them become a better presenter or become a better team leader or become a better, spokesperson for their brand or just to be better at communicating in so many ways. But even I will sometimes get, ooh, oh, I don't want to really tell him how awful he is.
Right.
So, or that this is, but you have to become very focused, and you have to respect yourself.
Mm.
That old adage of nobody's going to value you until you value yourself.
That's so hard, though. I feel like that's a hard thing to tell ourselves, especially in that moment. Like, I feel like we all struggle with that, right? Like, what was I thinking? Who am I, right, to say that or whatever? So,
Right.
so how do you overcome that? Like, if someone's listening and they're like, "Gosh, I feel that way all the time." What is it? Is it confidence? Is it confidence building? Like, what do you say? Like, you got this in your head? Like, what do you do?
Um, I, yes, what I do is I tell people, first of all, that they need to make a value list
Hmm.
and answer several questions like, what's my core competence?
Hmm. Oh.
What's, what do I really like to do?
Mm.
What makes me feel that I belong in that room? And it's just all these questions that when you start to answer them, it really kind of helps you crystallize it.
Right.
Then I talk about doing some mantras every day,
I love it.
the mirrors,
Yeah.
and just really talking to yourself like you would talk to your best friend, like you would talk to a peer who needs some help. Why do we allow ourselves to tell other people, you've got this, you're good at this, you can do it, but we don't do it to ourselves? Why?
So true. I don't know. It's a good question. Why? Because
And
at some place in our lives, we were spoken to maybe like that, or we
right,
took on that belief.
right. So I also believe in the power of using your own video. I use video a lot with people. I use it for practice purposes. I use it for really helping them see what they need to do better, etc. Because our own perception of ourselves is 30% less than what it is in reality.
Ooh. So you're saying people videotape themselves or whatever they want to do, videotape,
So videotape yourself.
and then look at it. Oh, I always hate it.
Well, there's a couple little steps in the way here
Okay.
along the way.
Okay.
So we're so self-critical. And what happens when I show people video, here's what I hear, especially with women. Oh, I hate my hair.
Yeah.
My voice sucks. Or
Right.
what, because they're so self-critical. And so I tell them, you get one thing you get to pinpoint in that moment that you're going to work on. Everything else you can do another time, but you get one thing. That's it. Only one.
Right.
But you don't just watch the video at first. At first, you just listen to it.
Mm.
Don't look, just listen. Listen to your voice, hear how you're speaking. Are you speaking with authority? Do you have up inflections, which turn things into a question instead of a statement? Are you speaking too fast? Just listen to it and just really let that sink in. And then wait for a day. And then you look at the video with the sound off.
Ooh.
Now, and that's all about body language, because now you can see, I wonder what she's trying to tell us. What's the emotion that's coming through there? What's the feeling? So now we've got this kind of this portion that says, what's my body saying? Because body language and our voice all go hand in hand. Then if you really want to get technical, you can just have it transcribed. And there's all those things you can do now that you can have your like there's a site called Otter, OTTER, that will transcribe a piece of video or whatever it is. I mean, there's a whole ton of them out there,
Yeah.
and most of them are free. And then you transcribe it, and now you look at the written words and you go, well, that sentence didn't make sense, or whatever it is.
Mm.
So now you've got these three parts. You've got the voice, then you've the visual,
Mhm.
and you've got the words or the content. Now you can look at the whole thing
Right.
and you say, oh, I see what I did really well, and
Yeah.
I see what I didn't do so well. And then you change it. And you can do that on a regular basis. Give yourself a half an hour a week and just talk. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be In fact, if you script it too much, then it'll be like you're reading or you're trying too hard. Make it more candid. Make it more just even telling a story.
Mm.
Then when you listen to it and watch it and read it, then you'll start to get who you truly are.
Hmm. But it's so interesting because I feel like when you said like people have a hard time finding what they like or the things when you said make the list, right? And I've noticed that a lot of people don't know what their passions are. They don't know what they enjoy doing, right? They don't know what lights them up.
Right. So you
Yeah.
should figure it out
Right.
because that's important because when you have true passion for something, everything falls into place.
Right.
And one other thing you can do, this takes a little guts, but pick 5 people. Let's say it's your spouse or your partner,
Hmm.
maybe your best friend, maybe a sibling, because siblings can be really candid.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah.
um, maybe a parent, maybe a peer. Just pick 5 people and ask them to give you not a lot, but either a phrase or 3 words that they would describe you.
Mm.
And you're going to be shocked at what they say.
Wow.
Shocked in a good way, not a
Yeah.
bad way, in a
Yeah.
good way, because they'll say, I love how organized you are. I love how you always stay true to who you are. I love your integrity. Or they'll say something, you're gonna go, I do that?
Mm.
I mean, really, you see that? And
Right.
it'll rock your world and make you feel so good.
Well, you also you I saw a few things you had posted online, and you work. Do you work predominantly with women? Because I don't know if it was just Women's History Month or whatever you were working with them, but who has the most struggles, men or women, when there comes to speaking in public? And,
Equally as much.
mm,
And I think women are a little more vulnerable and alone, not when they're in a whole big group with men and women. Um, they are they're much more honest about what they really want to work on and
mm,
what they really see as being their struggles. But men have as many struggles as women do. And sometimes theirs is the exact opposite because they're so afraid of allowing themselves to be vulnerable or allowing themselves to be in a place where they're truly passionate about something.
mm,
And they're just as worried about being judged as women are.
mm.
So it's um but sometimes their egos are much bigger and you got to work on kind of doing something about that too because it
Mm.
gets in their way. So I like working with both of them, but they're definitely different.
Yeah. Well, you've also, I mean, you talk about pivoting as a woman, successful woman, and
Mhm.
you left news and then you started this whole new business, and that's not easy.
No.
Yeah.
Uh,
Were you like at that point you're like, did you start it before you left news, or did you have a time to soul search and say, what do I want to do and what can I do? Because you're right, because I think in news it's like usually like, do I go in PR,
mhm.
or what do I do? Right?
Yeah.
So was it hard for you to do that?
I had a colleague who'd been my co-anchor for a while. Her name is Mary Savillo, and Mary had already created a business that was all about media training and presentation training. So I started to do some work with her, and to this day we collaborate. And I thought, let me try this. I mean, I have my business is basically about the communication stuff, but I do a lot of interviews on a conference stage, like a keynote interview, interviewing some pretty fabulous person.
Right.
Or I do a lot of emceeing. I do a lot of holding these workshops that are,
Mm-hmm.
with a lot of people in the room.
Hmm.
I still do a little tiny bit of video and broadcasting. I've got some video courses. So I've kind of expanded it in that way because I know I love, look, I've never met a microphone I didn't like, okay? So, and neither of you. So,
That's true. That's true. It's true.
so, so for me, it's just anything that has to do with communications. And I absolutely love working on the body language part of it because I'm so intrigued by it.
Mm.
What we're
Well,
saying
yeah.
without talking.
Ooh. Right. With our eyes, with our hands, with our postures.
Hmm.
What were some of the struggles that you faced when you started, maybe when you started your new business, or even struggles that you had in news? Because again, you were in it a while, and it's hard. TV news is not. They say, oh, glamorous TV news. It's hard. It's hard to get to the top. It's hard to stay on the top.
I think the staying part is even harder. But um, yeah, it's really, really glamorous. I got up at 3:20 in the morning.
Right.
That's really glamorous.
After
Okay.
how much sleep? What time did you go to bed?
Usually around eight,
Oh,
eight or 8:20,
if you could, probably, because
if
who
I
goes?
could. But when my daughter got to be a teenager, I was kind of like, and I'm living in New York City, I'm
Mm,
going, this kid's going to be out, and I will never know what trouble she can get into. And that's when I wanted off the morning news.
mm,
News can be a grind
mm,
because if you don't get the story on the air, and if you don't have great ratings, and I mean, you're monitored every single day for your ratings. If and it gets so mind-boggling precise that if somebody says, "Oh, that segment we did on, the the man-eating flesh, we can't ever do that again because ratings bombed." Well,
right,
that's probably not what happened at all. It meant that, couple people in your audience had to leave because
right. Yeah,
they don't get a lot of rating books out there,
yeah.
or whatever you call them now. But anyway, and you always had to look good.
Yeah.
Always had to be careful about your presence. Always had to be very careful about what you said,
Mhm.
not making sure that your language was appropriate, but also that you kept your opinions to yourself.
Mm.
That's not so true anymore.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's not it. People come out with their opinions all the time. But
Yes, and as you know, had we done that
yeah,
a while ago, we would have been
but
off
I
the
prefer
air.
that. But I prefer that. Let's just give people the information and let them figure
Yeah.
it out. Right?
Well, I think it's disrespectful to the audience.
Right.
I'm going to tell you what to think. Who am I to do that?
Right. Right.
And it used to it I mean, I could go on for hours on that subject, but the bottom line is we're supposed to be messengers.
Yes.
We are supposed to be able to take a story to somebody and allow them to make their own mind up about it and give them as many sides of the stories as we possibly can so that they have an opportunity to make their own decisions. And if you're not doing that, then what are you doing and who are you if you're pretending to be a journalist?
Right. You're right. It's all true. It's all true. Yeah, things have changed. Things have changed. There's some aspects of news I do not miss. And certainly I used to do some mornings too. And when my kids were little, I have to tell you, like getting up, the same thing. Sometimes it was 2:30 in the morning. And I was like, I've had probably 3 hours of sleep. When I was on air, I'm pretty sure I had some sort of slur because I was so exhausted and the coffee wasn't working anymore. Right?
Exactly. Exactly. You can only drink so much of it.
Right.
And
And then
then the other problem is if you're out in the field and you've had a lot of coffee,
there's
there's
no
nowhere to
bathroom.
go.
Right. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I have had to go for hours, right? Um,
And and it looks like you've got this amazing interview and it's wonderful, but nobody knows that it took you 6 months to get this person to talk to you.
right.
That all kinds of things happened at the last moment. Maybe it's like there's so much behind the scenes that people have no idea what's going on.
Mm,
And that does, after a while, it gets wearing. But the expectations for the years that I was in television were that people thought I knew a lot more than I did. They'd always ask me about what's the truth about this and this and this. I'd be like, I wasn't sitting in the Oval Office last night, so I can't tell you. But
right. He didn't text me. The president didn't text me what he really.
although, yes, exactly.
Right.
So it's, I mean, don't get me wrong. I loved my time in television news.
Mhm.
I loved walking in the doors at 30 Rock. I loved the the shows that I did. I loved the people that I met. I loved my curiosity being fulfilled every day. I loved being in that spot. There was nothing about it that didn't make me relish the idea of going to work every day.
Mm,
But there was a lot of stuff that you have to overlook.
right. What was the best advice you ever got for to succeed in news? Do you remember?
I had a boss that was a very big supporter of mine, mainly because he came from Iowa. But anyway, um, And he talked to me a lot about how to really make it. And one of the things he said to me is make your detractors your friends. And by that, because you get a lot of phone calls, emails, not so much text. Used to be letters from people that would say, I don't like you. Your voice stinks.
Mm-hmm.
You do this, you do that. Because, again, those old ratings play a big thing. And then there's also the Q scores that they used to do. I don't know if they do them anymore or not, but where they'd really check your popularity and where did you line up in comparison to everybody else at the station and who was going to go first if they had to make cuts, etc.
Which can be
So,
damaging. That can be so damaging to you.
yep. Yeah, you got to have really, really thick skin. But I once had this woman.
We have a minute left. Go ahead.
Oh, no, no, then we're not going to tell this story. Go
No,
on.
no, quick. Can you tell it
All
quick?
right, all right. She wrote me a letter and she said, and I was doing a show of my own. It was an email, and I always wore leather jackets, and we did this great Times Square scene. And she goes, "I can't. You're too old to dress like that." Blah 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 blah. And I wrote her back. I emailed her back, and I said, "Thank you for your comments. I really appreciate it. And okay, I'll try to tone down my dressing. Thank you. I'm so appreciative. Right anytime." She wrote me back, and she goes, "I'm sorry I sent that. I was just mad because my husband walked through the house and saw you on TV and said, 'Why can't you look like that?'"
Oh
So,
boy.
and
It's
she
your
became,
fault, Jane.
yeah, it's my fault. And she became my friend. So
Oh, well, that's nice. That's a lovely ending then. I think that's it. I can't believe we ran out of time. I could have you back. I mean, your stories are fabulous, and what you're doing to help women and CEOs get their message out is wonderful. So thank you so
super
much,
fun.
Jane. I appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
you have a great day.
You too. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you for coming on the show. I'm Jill Conway. Thank you for listening, everybody, to the show celebrating incredible women. I hope you are inspired to pursue your own goals. Believe in yourself and dream bigger. Your voice matters, and your story can help others. I hope you join us next time.